Hello, everyone. This is Bhaskar Pant from Policy Monks. Joining me today is Mr. Akil Khan from the Rajasthan Administrative Service for our first virtual discussion. Uh, this is part of a series on understanding COVID-19 response dynamics around the world. I would also like to thank our viewers who are joining us on a weekday, taking out time to send out their questions for the speaker and showing interest for this discussion. Mr. Khan is currently posted as a magistrate in the COVID-19 hotspot of Ramganj in Jaipur, Rajasthan, a state in northern India. Along with the people watching this live broadcast, I welcome Mr. Akil Khan to this discussion, and we hope to get enlightening insights from his experience of fighting the COVID-19 epidemic on the ground. Thank you, Mr. Khan.
Thank you, Bhaskar. It's a pleasure to be talking to you, and I hope we can have some nice conversation, and I could throw some light on the experience of managing COVID-19.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Mr. Khan, first of all, my first question to you, because you have been on the ground fighting the COVID-19, what was your experience on the ground? Did you experience a gap between the policy design and the policy implementation while you were responding to the COVID-19 crisis?
See, basically, what I feel is generally there is a perception that policy design occurs far from where policy implementation happens. And it is because of which the basic fact is that the relevant information which is available only on the ground, that doesn't come to the policymakers or the people who design policies. So that is a gap which generally people feel affects policy design. And especially when it is a crisis situation like a pandemic like this, this is a situation where you do not have any data so that you could come up with some data analysis and formulate your policies. So your policies have to be very dynamic in the sense that you have to keep taking feedback from the ground, and every day you have to keep on updating your policy depending upon how the situation on ground is changing. So that is exactly what has happened. Like, the higher officials in the government were conscious about this fact that they'll have to pursue with policy dynamics, wherein every day they would take feedback from people who were posted on the front line. Like, I was at the intersection of front line, which is the policy implementation part, and also of the discussions on policy making. So this also helped me understand how the government and the administration goes very dynamic when it comes to crisis situations like this. And this was also one of the reasons why Rajasthan state in particular, if I talk about, could contain COVID to a certain extent, and even the recovery rate is a lot better.
Well, actually, that was my second question to you, Mr. Khan. Rajasthan has one of the best recovery rates when it comes to COVID-19 in India. Can you throw some light on what has been the Rajasthan government's strategy to combat COVID-19?
See, what I feel is that Rajasthan has been very proactive. It was the first state to go for a complete lockdown on the 22nd of March, which was even before the national lockdown. Secondly, when we started facing a lot of positive cases, we went for aggressive sampling, aggressive testing, which also helped us understand the spread of this disease. Then, when we realized that the number of tests were not enough, Rajasthan was also the first state to go for rapid testing. Although that didn't work out very well later on, but then it was this kind of an effort and policy that helped Rajasthan contain it. So aggressive testing was there. Planning was quite strong, wherein the government ensured that for the next 2 months, even though the lockdown was initially just for 3 weeks, but still it was decided that for next 2 months we should ensure that food supplies are given, the ration kits were given to the needy and the poor. So all this helped to counter COVID-19 and contain.
Mr. Khan, Ramganj has been one of the biggest hotspot in the state. As a policy practitioner and administrator, what were the biggest challenges that you faced while fighting COVID-19?
See, as a policy practitioner, if I tell you, initially also I just mentioned that the need of the hour in any kind of crisis is that the decision making has to be very quick and dynamic. That we need to assess and analyze situation on ground and accordingly formulate our policies or amend our policies. So that is what we did. The challenge as such was just that the situation was changing regularly. So we just had to be on our toes to ensure that we could counter whatever new challenges were coming. As an administrator, if you see, I would basically like to divide this situation into 3 phases. So the first phase, which was the containment phase, which you can assume by even before the lockdown, we had started thinking about it, how we can contain it. And that went on till, I would say, even now, that's a phase where we are planning to contain it, trying to contain it. But simultaneously, there is an overlapping of a transition phase, I would say, wherein we also know this for the fact that now it might not be possible to contain it and we'll have to design policies or we'll have to work on living with it. So after containment phase, where we had the administrative challenges like testing people, because that was the only way to find out how much has it spread. And the second one was to ensure social distancing. And specifically, if you're talking about the Ramganj area, that's an urban, poor, densely populated area. So in such areas, social distancing has a lot of challenges because people, like 8 to 10 people residing in one room without any window. So you cannot expect them to stay inside for maybe 30 or 40 odd days. So that was a challenge administratively. Another challenge was to get people out to go for testing, because initially there were some kind of misinformation, or I would say, since majority of the people in that locality are not well educated, so they were not aware of the gravity of this issue, how this COVID-19 had already hit globally a lot of people. So they were not aware of this fact, and that was another administrative challenge, that we had to create awareness, and the community leaders helped us in that. So this is how we countered these challenges.
Thank you. Mr. Khan, we also received a lot of questions for you, people from all walks of life, from organizations, from think tanks. So I'm going to have selected some of the questions that we have received, and we'll also try to take some questions off the Facebook Live. People are watching us and writing. The first question is from Tavishi Darbari from the National Institute of Urban Affairs. She wants to know what was the emergency response strategy for sanitary workers, people working in sanitation of your government.
Mm-hmm. See, basically, we know that sanitation workers were the ones without whom we could not have done anything. So the initial idea was to provide them with the safety kits. So safety measures were taken so that that team is safe and they can run for long. They do it for long, because wherever we found any positive, we had to sanitize that area. We were regularly sanitizing the dispensaries or the local medical centers. So it was ensured that all those workers' safety was our priority. So we ensured that through providing them with the kits.
The second question that I want to take is from Rajat Asthana from NLSUI. He wants to ask you that, can you elucidate some unexpected challenges that you might have faced during the implementation when the lockdown has been going on?
See, initially, we expected people to follow lockdown. So that was in itself a challenge when we realized that people are not following lockdown. So that was there. Secondly, we were not sure how long this lockdown would go. So another challenge was to ensure food supplies. Like we started with the milk supplies in the morning, then vegetable supply, general grocery supplies. So all these things were to be maintained. And since in this particular area, it had been a hotspot by then, like within first 2 weeks of the finding the first patient, we had almost 500 positives. So we knew that we'll have to contain this area, because of which it was very important to ensure door-to-door food supply. And then only for medical emergencies, we were allowing people to move out. Otherwise, it was contained. So these were the basic challenges. And of course, a bit of law and order issues somewhere to ensure that people stay inside. So these were the initial challenges.
Thank you. The next question is from N. Nargis Fatima from University Business School, Punjab University, Chandigarh. She wants to know whether there is a state level action plan that is there from the government, and are there any district level plans, because the problem of COVID might vary from district to district. So what are the challenges that the government is facing while implementing a state level plan or a district level plan? And according to you, where are the loopholes that can be fixed?
See, I think the government and administration, they know this for the fact that we have to be dynamic. We have to adapt to different situations in different parts of the state. So there cannot be a uniform policy as such. We have certain changes. Of course, the underlying policy is the same, that we need to save lives. But other than that, depending upon hotspots and depending upon the other areas, the policies differ a bit. So the government is conscious about it. We know that how we need to adapt to different situations in different parts of the state. So the policies are dynamic. So I don't think there is any problem or any loophole because of having a uniform policy.
Thank you. The next question that I want to take is from Charu Bhati, who represents the Hunger Project. She wants to know, how will rural governance function after Corona? What are going to be the challenges in rural areas specifically due to Corona?
What I feel is because a lot of migrants are moving back to their hometowns, that would be a challenge to provide livelihood to them in their hometowns, because of which they had moved out. So now government has already planned for that as well. As you must have heard that in NREGA, which is the largest welfare policy in the world, the budget has been increased substantially to accommodate these migrants who have gone back to their hometowns, so that there can be a minimum basic livelihood given to them, provided to them, so that the challenge of food is ensured, that is countered. So that is one thing. And of course, now what I also feel is that agriculture and farming also needs to be taken care of, where the government, especially in Rajasthan, the Deputy Chief Minister, who's also the Rural Development Minister of the state, he has already taken certain measures to ensure that how the future of agriculture and farming would be, how to ensure that the farmers who have been struggling to sell their crops, they get fair prices for that. So measures have already started by the government, and I'm sure these things will help, specifically with NREGA. I think initially, for at least a year or so, we should be able to counter this, and then gradually, I hope things will get fine, things will get better, and we'll get back to normal.
Our next question is actually from my colleague, Mr. Amit Lal, who wants to know that COVID is an unprecedented epidemic that we have, COVID-19, which we have seen. The government didn't have much time to ideate. Usually, government has a roadmap, they have previous plans to work on things. So how much things have changed on the ground for the government per se, and also the working of the government? That is what he wants to know.
See, the first change, the major change is that the whole government machinery is involved in saving lives. So that's the major change that has come because of this pandemic. Then, secondly, now we also understand that we need to strike a balance, because we cannot continue with the whole force to counter pandemics. So now we have to take care of economy as well. So balancing between saving lives and getting economy back on track. So the government is trying to create that balance. If you would see how the lockdown is being opened uh, gradually in phases, that is also a proof of this fact that government is consciously taking call that how we can gradually open market for everyone, and at the same time ensure that the pandemic does not affect us in a major way.
The next question that I want to take is from Mr. Arun Ameta from Niti Aayog, Government of India. He wants to know that how were you able to deal with the psychological impact that Corona was having on the residents in the Ramganj area. There is an unknown fear of coming out and going out to get tested. How did you deal with that situation?
See, the major challenge, as I mentioned earlier, also was the urban poor residential settlements. These are unplanned settlements wherein it was difficult for them to maintain social distancing. There is a lack of education in people staying there, because majority of them are involved into informal economic sector. They are either rickshaw pullers or daily wagers, basically, who are into the silver jewelry industry. They are labor class. A lot of them have been coming to this area from Bengal, Bihar, and UP. So now the challenge was to ensure social distancing in the smaller residential settlements that they stay. Then there was another challenge which was related to the cultural aspect. Like if there are 8 members in a family with female members as well, the male members would find it difficult to stay whole day inside, because they wanted to give some time, because the gender aspect also comes into play. They wanted to give some personal or private time to the female members of the family. So because of which this challenge was there. It's not, you must have heard this quite a lot now, that social distancing is also a luxury which not everybody can afford. So that was a major challenge in this particular area of Ramganj, because of which we had to look for some out of the way solutions. So we roped in local community leaders because of the uneducation, lack of education. The awareness was also not there. So we had to somehow strike a balance that people understand the problem, and they also, within their limited capacity, follow social distancing as much as possible. So now ultimately what I also feel is that even now, in because this is there to stay for a while, the pandemic. So I think community-driven solutions or the bottom-up approach is the way forward. We need to rope in community leaders, because they reside in these areas, they understand the problems of these areas, and if we rope in them and if we get them into participation, political participation, or if we take their feedback for policy making, it'll be great help to get better practical policies.
Thank you. Our next question is from Mr. Manoj, who is a freelance professional from Barmer district of Rajasthan. He wants to know what was the biggest, like, we have talked about a lot of challenges that you have faced on the ground. But if there was one big challenge that you faced that far exceeds all of the ones that you have already mentioned, what would that be?
See, initially, the fear was a lot more. now we have got a bit used to of it. So when we used to go initially, and we have got used to of it in a way that we understand that the mortality is not that high as we were expecting it during initial 3 to 4 weeks. So now we are in a better position to counter it. But initially 3 to 4 weeks, we actually felt that it was a battleground wherein we would ask people to come get tested. We would move with them whole day. We would convince them to get tested. We would ensure that they, when they are at the local medical centers, they maintain social distancing. And every day we would see some 7 to 8% of those people who were tested coming positive. So we knew that we are moving in a very scary situation. And at that point of time, a couple of my team members, like a policeman, member of the medical team, they were tested positive. So that is one incident where we actually felt that we need to make sure that there are at least two teams. That even if one team is working for a couple of weeks, they should be quarantined and the next team should take their place, so that even if there is any issue like that, wherein any of them is tested positive, you could ensure that by the time it is 2 weeks, they can get better, they can come back and take the ground again. Like even I came into contact with a couple of positives, and because of which I had to isolate for a couple of weeks, and I was working from one of our schools. So I would just coordinate things on telephone, because I knew that I cannot take liberty of going out, because I was in close contact with positives. So I could not have taken that chance to interact with any of my other colleagues. So these were the major challenges that we had initially. And now, since we know we are taking better precautions, since we know that immunity is also very important, that will help people to get over it. And that is what we are now moving towards, getting into the concept of herd community. I hope it works. So now gradually the challenges are changing.
I have some last questions from the Center for Policy Research. Ms. Sanjana, who works there, she has sent a couple of questions which I think are very relevant to the discussion that we are having right now. The first question that she has asked is, how are funds from the District Disaster Management Fund being utilized? And is the data being made publicly available?
See, I don't think I'm the right person to respond to this, because the funds are managed by a different department and the other higher officials. So I do not have much to do about it.
Another question that she has asked is, what are your data requirements, and have you been able to adapt or create new data systems to cater to new needs which are arising due to COVID-19, such as contact tracing, availability of hospital beds, movement of migrants, delivery of social welfare schemes, distribution of ration, and other things? So,
yes.
How are you collecting data for that?
So basically, it's like a teamwork. Different teams are working on different aspects. For ration, we have a different team which is basically managed by the corporate, the municipal corporation. So that is a separate department. They initially were providing ration kits to those who had ration cards, but later we realized that we also need to provide it to those people who do not have active ration cards. So government was flexible. We had clear instructions that even if a few people get the ration twice or thrice, we need to ensure that nobody should sleep hungry. So that was it. So this was during the first lockdown. And depending upon we started collecting data from there itself. So which has helped us in the lockdown 2, 3, and the fourth lockdown. So now things have become smoother. We know where all we need to provide food, ration, cooked food, especially if you talk about migrants, we all have been observing and feeling really bad about the situation of migrants. It has been heart wrenching to see how they have been walking for hundreds of kilometers. So now everybody in administration and government also feels the same pain which any commoner feels. And the reason why this happened, that people might feel that government is not taking care, or people might feel that administration is not empathetic enough. But the point is, we need to understand what happened actually, because initially the decision was taken that there should not be any movement of migrants. So our focus was to ensure that wherever they are, we should provide them with the food. So that was initial target. So we were focused on that, and we ensured that everybody gets food, whether it is cooked food or dry ration. If people had some place where they could cook, we were providing them with the dry ration. People who could not manage to cook, we were providing them with the cooked meal every day twice. So there was a system, and we were busy with this. Meanwhile, we realized that after second lockdown, people became restless. All the migrants, they became restless because they also could not find an end to this, because nobody knew how long will this continue. So they started moving. Until then, we were not prepared for them to be moved, because the policy was that we need to ensure that whosoever is at whichever place should be provided with food, and safety should be ensured. So we were focused on that. Now, when they started moving, then the governments started thinking that now, since they are not mentally prepared to stay at the places where they were, we should provide them with the buses or the trains. So this took that there was some gap in this, which of course caused a lot of problems to migrants. And this is something for which we all feel very bad, and we all have been working day and night to ensure that as many buses and trains as we can arrange. We have started doing that from Rajasthan every day now. The trains are going to Bihar, Bengal. For Bengal, we haven't started yet, but UP and Bihar, the trains have already started. In the next 1 week, hopefully we'll have other trains. The passes for buses were issued on priority for sending migrants to their hometowns, because now we also realize that it's been quite a while and they are feeling restless. They want to go back to their home. So we should arrange for that. So that there was a gap here when people started walking without the administration realizing that they do not want to stay at the place. So that is where I think this gap lies.
So how do we get their faith back? We have a question on our live stream where someone is asking Mr. R.M. Tiwari that there is a deep crisis of faith among the migrants and the laborers now. So how does the government go back to them, get their faith back? Because ultimately these migrants and laborers, they are going to come back to the states where they were working. So how do we bring that faith back?
See, ultimately, they would realize this because of two reasons. First, wherever they were, when they were in Rajasthan, if we talk about in particular, we were ensuring their safety and food. So that was the minimum that we had to do initially, and that is what we were supposed to do. So we ensured that I can talk about my particular area where we have thousands of migrants, and we ensured that everybody gets food. Of course, not everybody got it from the government, because a lot of NGOs were also coming to support us. A lot of people from their local neighborhoods were also doing that. They are still doing it. So, but we, as officials, administrators, and government officials, we have that record that, okay, for this particular area, these people are taking care of the food, so we can skip this area where there is nobody to take care. We are ensuring that nobody should live or stay without food. So that has been our major call. So I think they realized this fact. The only problem was that they were not keen to stay. And of course, for valid reason, because they could not see any end to this lockdown and they wanted to go back home because they were here without work. And this has its own insecurities when you are not going for work, when you are being provided food every day. The insecurities are there because of which they were leaving. I totally understand that, and we all empathize with that. But now they would understand this, that the government provided with the food, and when now almost 300,000 people from Jaipur itself, from Jaipur district, they are to be moved to their home state. So we are preparing for that. We have already started with the trains and buses. So I think they would get this confidence back.
Thank you, Mr. Khan, for your insights. One final question that I want to ask. We have talked about the problems, the challenges, how the government has been dealing with it. What, according to you, are the key learnings for the government from the COVID-19 crisis? And how do we prepare for such pandemics in the future? Because there has been a lot of talk that COVID-19 can come back, there can be a second wave, there might be other pandemics similar to COVID-19 in the future. So how do we prepare as policy practitioners, as people working with the government? How do we prepare for such pandemics in the future?
See, I was reading to an article day before, which has been written by Professor Adam. He's from the American University in DC. He has worked on slums in India. He has done some extensive research, and his reports have been exceptionally grounded and very insightful. So, and I could relate to what I have been experiencing during the past 2 months with what he has mentioned. And the major point that he mentions, and which I also agree with, is that there is a need to rework urban poor settlements in India, because these are the places which are totally unplanned with very limited public resources being provided to them. Most of the people here are working in informal sector, so they have their own fears. And how to do that? For that, I think one major point is that in case we have to face, as you just asked, that we have to face challenges like social distancing or countering some virus disease through some hygiene dynamics. For that, we would need to rework our urban poor settlements. We would have to make sure that such densely populated, unplanned areas, people should be moved out from there. There should be proper hygiene, proper sanitation, where people could live a decent standard of life. That is one thing. Another general learning that I personally feel should be there, wherein we also need support of every citizen. In fact, every citizen should feel this, that it is the time for everyone to introspect and take some major calls for creating an environment-friendly world. Because this is a chance for us to go back and to introspect and to come up with different kind of lifestyle, or at least to correct our lifestyles.
Thank you, Mr. Akhil Khan. One final question that I have received from Mr. Avinash Kalla. He's the founder of Talk Journalism. He wants to know how much role does politics play in making policy? What is the role of politics in policy? Very interesting.
Yes, it is interesting, and he's a good friend of mine. And I think for policies, ultimately, the vision comes from politicians. The civil servants or the bureaucracy, their job is to formulate or to give shape to that vision. So policies are all about vision and how you shape it. So it's a teamwork, but then ultimately the vision comes from politicians. So politics is very important. Politicians' vision is what helps in building policies.
Thank you, Mr. Akil Khan. Thank you for such an enlightening discussion with Policy Monks. I am sure the viewers enjoyed your insights on the COVID-19 crisis, and how you have been dealing with the crisis on the ground is truly exemplary. I want to thank the audience for being a part of this discussion. And I promise our audience that this is just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, we will have panelists and speakers from around the world, from Africa to the UK to the US. We'll try to cover as many countries as we can in these discussions. So thank you all. And thank you, Mr. Khan, again, for being a part of this discussion.
Thanks for inviting me, and wish you best. And I'm looking forward to your further discussions on this.
Thank you, Mr. Khan. Thank you, everyone.